This is Dateline News and Conversation. Dimitri Lascaris is my guest, a good friend. He's back. We're going to talk about the horrific situation in the Middle East, the Israeli genocide, just completely unhinged, unrestricted violence like the world has never seen. Dimitri, you've been covering this for a long time. You've been there several times. What can you tell me about the situation right now in the Middle East? Israelis are committing genocide against the Palestinian people. They're attacking Syria, they're attacking Lebanon, they've attacked Iran, threatening more attacks. Iran is threatening Israel. If they do it, they're going to obliterate them. Help me understand what's going on.
Well, let's begin with Gaza. The pace of killing has arguably accelerated in the past couple of weeks. The Israelis seem to have embarked on a plan to eliminate, literally exterminate all Palestinian life in the northern part of the Gaza Strip. And we are seeing daily, it's almost routine now, Regis, that they attack the displaced people who are harboring or seeking sanctuary in churches, hospital facilities, UN schools. There's simply no, I think, even pretense at this stage that they're not trying to attack persons who have been displaced and that they are trying to wipe out the civilian population in the north. They've, by the estimates of the Lancet, a prestigious British medical journal, several months ago, I think it's been a few months since they issued this assessment, the number of killed directly and indirectly, because of course, the number we're getting out of Gaza, which the Zionist, constituency claims to be an overestimate, is actually grossly underestimating the death being caused because it focuses strictly on those who have been killed by direct Israeli fire or by collapsing structures that have been bombed by Israel. But then there are people who are killed because they are not unable to get medical care. People who are chronically ill and who can't survive without reasonably good health care on a regular basis. There are people who are starving to death. There are people who, who knows, commit suicide, whatever. There's all sorts of ways in which people are dying indirectly as a result of the genocide. And the Lancet estimated the number there could be higher than 180,000 just several months ago. So now we may well be into a territory in terms of the death toll, direct, indirect, of 250 or 300,000 people, in excess of 10% of the population, the pre-October 7th population of Gaza. There's no indication whatsoever that the West is placing any restraint upon Israel at all. There's no red line. There's no atrocity that the West is not willing to tolerate. At least here, I'm talking, of course, about the governments, not the general population. That's Gaza. And of course, they killed Yahya Sinwar, who was the leader of the military wing of Hamas, and was elevated to the leader of the political wing of Hamas after they assassinated the Israelis, Ismail Haniyeh, the political leader of Hamas, in Tehran when its president was being inaugurated into office. So the killing of Sinwar seems to have, at least the disclosure of it, has backfired terribly on the Israelis, because what it showed was that he was not hiding in a tunnel surrounded by hostages, but in fact he was above ground fighting alongside his men, carrying a Kalashnikov rifle, grenades, and he died in combat against a vastly better armed military force and fought to the bitter end, even to the point of, after losing a hand, when a tank shell was fired at him, he threw a stick at a drone that had been sent into a building by soldiers who were too cowardly to go in there and confront him. They didn't know who he was. They just knew that he was a fighter. And then they killed him with another tank shell. They displayed this to the entire world, and they've desperately tried to undo the public relations fallout from this which is that he died leading his people in battle after having spent, by the way, 20 years in prison, in an Israeli prison, and being a hunted man for the past year and living in horrific conditions alongside people being subjected to a genocide. So that's Gaza. In the West Bank, the Israelis have elevated their attacks on the civilian population, particularly the refugee camps, Jenin and Tulkarm, the largest of the refugee camps where I was in March of this year. And now we have this expanding war on the civilian population of Lebanon. I was in Beirut last weekend, so about a week ago. I went into Dahia, the southern suburb, which is reputed to be the stronghold of Hezbollah. I saw many buildings that had been leveled to the ground. I saw medical facilities that had been destroyed. Dahia itself, which had a pre-war population of about 800,000 people, is a ghost town. People have left, and I saw people all over Beirut. I hadn't seen this before. There was already a high level of poverty and homelessness because of the economic crisis, but I hadn't seen, thousands of people sleeping in the streets, having erected tents on sidewalks and along the coast, people sleeping out of their cars. We went into churches and schools inside Beirut itself where the displaced were being housed. And there's a real fear that Israel is going to repeat in Beirut what it has done elsewhere, and it's going to actually go after and target the displaced themselves. And so when we were walking around Beirut, in the neighborhood of Hamra, which is a religiously diverse part of central Beirut, we saw this huge commercial office tower, which hadn't been completed because of the economic crisis. It was a state of incompletion. And people, the displaced had taken it over. You could see their laundry hanging out of the windows of this commercial office tower. So I was filming it, and we were accosted by security officials of the Syria National Social Party, which is a pro-resistance party of Syrian nationalists. It was their neighborhood that we were in, and they told us that they didn't want us filming any of the displaced, any of the structures that were housing the displaced. And we asked them why, and they said because Israel will target them. It will actually go after them because they're housing the displaced. So this is where we find ourselves now, Regis. It's just as you put it at the outset, it's a horror show beyond reckoning, beyond description. And the thing that shocks me the most about it, as someone who was born and raised in the West, I already had a very, very low opinion of my government going into this horror show, but I never imagined that they would allow it to come to this. I always assumed that out there somewhere there was a red line. I didn't know where it was, but there isn't, not in their minds. And the only way that this is going to be brought to an end, sadly, is by military means.
Oh, wow. Dimitri, well, there's a number of questions I want to ask you, and we got a limited time here. What about the axis of resistance? I just read where the United States and, I don't know, France or UK just did some kind of carpet bombing of Yemen. How effective are they? And what's your opinion about the axis of resistance?
They clearly have taken a number of blows at the leadership level, particularly Hezbollah and Hamas. The leadership of Ansar Allah in Yemen, I'm not aware of them having the Americans, the British, or the Israelis having killed any of the top leaders there. But Hezbollah and Hamas have taken terrible blows at the leadership level. But there's really no indication, Regis, that this has diminished their combat capability at all. On the first day that the Israelis, after having killed Hassan Nasrallah and the top military commanders of Hezbollah, the first day they tried to enter by land into South Lebanon, 8 of their soldiers were killed. This is where the elite paratroopers of the military, and dozens were wounded. And in Gaza itself, just yesterday, I believe it was, the militants blew up and killed the commander, a colonel, of the 401st Mechanized Brigade, or the brigade of the Armored Division of the Israeli military, and killed 2 of his subordinates who were also relatively senior officers in that brigade. There were 2 other soldiers who were killed in Gaza within the past 24 hours. So the Israeli military's casualties, as far as I can tell, have actually increased significantly in the past month when they've inflicted the most damage on the leadership of these two militant organizations. And then, of course, you have Iran, who on October 1st demonstrated beyond a shadow of a doubt that they can penetrate Israel's air defenses with their hypersonic missiles and strike anything they want. And lastly, I'll just mention that Hezbollah struck the home of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu with a drone in the past 24 hours. He has a seaside home in a swank community known as Caesarea, known for its opulent villas and its Roman amphitheater. And there's photographic proof that they struck the home. The drone hit a thick bulletproof glass. It didn't manage to penetrate, but you can see damage on the side of the wall. So they can't even protect, the Israeli air defenses can't even protect the prime minister from Hezbollah, let alone stop the hypersonic missiles of Iran penetrating the airspace of Israel.
What is your thought and feeling about Iran being drawn into this? Do you think that I mean, you mentioned you don't think there's any more red lines. How stupid, how crazy could the Israelis be to really try to attack Iran when Iran has proven it can strike anywhere it wants, as you have just said, and they probably, if they wanted, could take out Netanyahu. What are your thoughts on the possibility of this really escalating?
I would have said it's an inevitability, but I think that it's interesting. I had an interview. I interviewed Ray McGovern, former CIA analyst, an outspoken critic of U.S. foreign policy, on the 16th of October. And we talked about this very issue. And he said, why hasn't Israel attacked Iran in 16 days since the missile attack on Israel? And he believes, and I think he may be right, is that the military of Israel has begun to raise serious concerns with the political leadership of the genocidal state about the wisdom of trying to attack Iran, because Iran is, I think at this, it's very clear that Iran will retaliate to any attack. And the more serious the attack it sustains, the more serious the counterattack it will level against Israel. So he said it's possible. He did say he thought he was an outlier in this regard, that most of his colleagues in the intelligence and military establishment, independent colleagues, think that Israel will attack. But he thought it's possible that they have been caused enough concern that they won't, and that they'll engage in some limited face-saving attack that won't precipitate a severe retaliation by Iran. So I think he made a fairly persuasive case, Regis. My money is still on the Israelis attacking. They're saying they're going to attack. They've said it repeatedly. And you may know that in the last 48 hours, two documents, top secret U.S. intelligence documents, were leaked, which the Americans are behaving as though they're real. Now, they could be fakes that were planted there by the Americans and the Israelis, but they're behaving as though they're real. They're calling for an investigation into all of this. And they show that Israel is, in fact, appears to be engaged in major preparations for some kind of a missile, a combination perhaps of, surface-to-surface missiles plus aerial bombardment done, this would be long-range bombardment that would require mid-air refueling. So there were indications they were preparing for that. Interestingly, where I live here in Greece, in Kalamata, spend much of my time nowadays. I'm up on a mountain on the southern coast, and it's been known that Greece has allowed the Israeli Air Force to use, this was reported by the press in the last couple of years, to use Greek airspace to practice bombing runs on Iran. And there's a military air base, which you can see from my house, as a matter of fact, because we're up on a mountain, where the Israelis have a drone training center. They're training Greeks on how to use their drones, Elbit systems. And I see military aircraft doing training over the bay of Kalamata every day. But something I'd never seen before is two jets, which didn't look like the jets I normally see. They looked like F-35s to me, came screaming over my house on the mountain and then went down into the valley and then came up the opposite side of the valley over a mountain. And they did this twice, and they were flying so low that they scared the cats that were sitting on our balcony. They terrified them. And it looked to me like these aircraft, which were not the customary aircraft, were practicing the kind of radar evasion tactics that the Israelis would have to engage in order to attack Iran by flying very low to the ground, in mountainous terrain. I don't know whether that's in fact what's going on. In any event, whatever's happening here, it seems relatively clear that the Israelis are preparing for attack. And one thing I want to say about this is that, as you well know, Regis, the BRICS summit is about to begin in Kazan. Major event for geopolitics and for the era of U.S. hegemony, which is rapidly coming to an end. And Iran is going to be there. The president has announced he's going to attend. I think that if Israel is going to attack, there is a high risk that it's going to do that during the BRICS summit. Because Iran's president will be abroad, but more than anything, this would deliver a huge blow to the, shall we say, the prestige and the attention being drawn to this particular event. Russia, of course, is closely allied with Iran. The Chinese are closely allied with Iran. What better way to, deliver a black eye to the BRICS summit than for the Americans to have their rabid attack dog bomb Iran in the next 3 days? So I think there's a risk that that's going to happen. I haven't seen any speculation to that effect, but just knowing how these people think, let us hope that during the next 3 days we get through them without any kind of a major escalation in the Middle East.
Yeah, I too fear that something somewhere, quite possibly Israel attacking Iran during the BRICS meetings in Kazan this week. It certainly would take the attention off the BRICS meetings. But I'd like to ask you this, since it's well known that Russia and Iran are closely aligned. Do you believe any of the chatter, the conversations that Russia is providing Iran with hypersonic missiles, their anti-missile system, that S-400 or S-500? Do you think they're providing them with drones, any other kind of assistance? What are your thoughts on that?
I don't think there's been any official confirmation by either the Iranian government or the Russian Federation's government that that's the case. They seem to have been quite restrained in publicly commenting on the level and nature of cooperation between the militaries of the two countries. But the independent military experts and analysts and diplomats who are out there pontificating about this are all they're unanimous that Russia has provided at least its most advanced air defense systems, which you mentioned, the S-400s. I believe there's now an even more advanced iteration, the S-500, which is available, and also electronic warfare equipment, highly advanced electronic warfare equipment. You have people like Alistair Crook, former British diplomat, saying this, Ray McGovern saying it, Scott Ritter is saying it, Matthew Ho, Lawrence Wilkerson, former chief of staff. These people have better sources than I do. And it makes sense. It makes sense that the Russians would do it. I mean, the Americans and the British and the other vassals of the United States have been funneling hundreds of billions of dollars of weapons and military assistance of other kinds to Ukraine. And they've put into Ukraine military advisors. And who knows, they may well have military personnel of Western militaries operating things like Patriot air defense systems in Ukraine. And so these military experts I mentioned are not only of the view, unanimous, that Russia has provided sophisticated defensive equipment to Iran, but they're saying that they have even provided the technicians to operate them. And even that there will be Russian pilots flying the most advanced Russian fighter jets, in Iranian airspace to defend it in the event of an aerial attack on Iran. It stands to reason the Russians have every incentive to do it. It would be a pretty effective way to engage in some payback after what Russia has endured at the hands of NATO over the past 2.5 years. Whether it goes beyond that, I don't know, Regis, but I would be very surprised if Russia has not provided very significant military assistance to Iran.
All right. Here's the $64,000 question. how does Russia reconcile its support of Iran, but also Israel? And it seems to me that Putin and Russia, official Russiandom, have not condemned Israel. I mean, I think they've insisted that they stop the killing and the fighting, but there seems to always have been this Russian allegiance to Israel. What's your take on that?
Well, my interpretation of the statements of the Russian ambassador to the United Nations, other Russian diplomats, Sergei Lavrov, and President Putin himself is that they have condemned Israel. And this is a change in tone. It is true that up until the genocide began, the Russian government was actually very, very restrained in its criticism of Israel. It's important to understand that its voting at the United Nations, which I have followed carefully, particularly in regard to this issue, the Russian government has consistently voted in defense of Palestinian rights. I'm not aware of a single instance. Every year, there's literally dozens of resolutions that are directly or indirectly related to Palestine. Every single time Russia votes, doesn't abstain, certainly doesn't vote in favor of Israel. It always supports international legal principles applicable to the plight of the Palestinian people. But rhetorically, the Russian government was very restrained. That changed within the past year. And I've seen some extremely harsh language coming out of Russia. And in fact, Russia warned Israel not to invade South Lebanon quite explicitly. And I saw some reports that Israel was striking targets in Syria that are very close to Russia's military base there. So I think that the game has changed. And I think why has this been so? Because Russia tries, Russia's government has a policy of trying to get along with everybody. It's been sympathetic to the Palestinian people, but it was also trying to maintain good relations with Israel. And Israel does have a large Russian population. But recently, Russia urged its citizens to get out of Israel. And that is just one indication that the game has changed. And I think Israel now views Russia unequivocally as being hostile. And it is. It is hostile.
Wow. A couple more questions here before we finish. There's a really very contentious election coming up in the United States here in a matter of a couple of weeks. Both of those candidates, Trump and Kamala Harris, are pro-Israel. I have a hard time understanding how the people in the United States are not talking about that. They're just saying, on one hand, Trump is bad, and that's why we have to have Kamala Harris. But I guess my question to you is, regardless of who is elected, will American foreign policy change? I know the answer to that, in my opinion, is nothing will change. And that is basically Russia's position. What are your thoughts?
I think that's highly likely. As Vladimir Putin has noted in the past, American foreign policy seems to stay, amazingly consistent no matter who is the president. And even though we had to endure for 4 years, even now we continue to hear this nonsense that Russia stole the 2016 election in which Hillary Clinton lost to Trump. Trump did a lot of things that were very antagonistic towards Russia. His administration was arming the Ukrainians. His administration insisted that continued the party line that Ukraine would become part of NATO in violation of assurances that had been given to Gorbachev by the West. His administration assassinated the top Iranian general, Soleimani, in 2020 in Iraq. His administration destroyed the nuclear deal with Iran. The Obama-era nuclear deal, which the Russians supported, and they were quite annoyed and concerned that the Trump administration pulled out of the JCPOA, as it's called. So I think all indications it is very likely, Regis, that there will be no profound change in U.S. foreign policy. But Trump is saying that he's going to bring an end to the war in Ukraine and that this must be done by negotiation, which at least rhetorically is better than the position being taken by Kamala Harris, who has been endorsed by Dick Cheney, the ultimate neocon, John Bolton. These people who are the ultimate warmongers, who are more committed to the project of U.S. global hegemony than anybody in the U.S. foreign policy elite, have endorsed her. So that tells you a lot. But he's at least saying, Trump, that he's going to bring it to an end. And Trump, in the Middle East, I don't think it's a guarantee that he will allow this to continue. Not because he cares about Palestinians, he couldn't care less about Palestinians. But he might have the good sense to realize that this is going to end in Israel's destruction, that it is going to cause U.S. military bases to be attacked in the region, and they are quite vulnerable, and that this is going to cause, if there is a full-blown war in the West Asia, that the price of oil will soar, and this is going to do severe damage to the U.S. economy. So for purely self-interested reasons, there's a small chance, I think, that he will try to rein Israel in. At the end of the day, Regis, whatever Trump's intentions may or may not be, anybody out there who's eligible to vote in the U.S. election, I'm not. But I can tell you right now, there is no circumstance under which I would vote for Kamala Harris. Zero. I don't really care at this stage who her opponent is, who her Republican opponent is. What I know about Kamala Harris is that she's a genocidal lunatic psychopath. She supported this genocide, and that is the ultimate evil. Nobody can do anything worse than this. You forfeit the right to argue you're the lesser evil when you commit the ultimate evil. So anybody out there who's thinking that they should vote for Kamala Harris because Trump is worse, I urge you to reconsider your position.
Okay. The last time we talked, which was a few months ago, I asked you if you thought that Israel could survive as a state. What are your thoughts today?
I believe Israel is doomed. It's just a matter of time now. Israel's economy is being destroyed. I had a conversation with Professor Jeffrey Sachs about this 2 weeks ago. I interviewed him on my program, Reason to Resist. He concurred with that assessment. Of course, his economic expertise is second to none. The country's credit rating is just above junk bond level. It's been downgraded twice. The Port of Eilat has declared bankruptcy. The Israeli economy contracted in the fourth quarter of last year by something like 25%, a depression era type economic contraction, and who knows what's happened since then. It certainly has gotten worse. Thousands upon thousands of important contributors to the Israeli workforce have been permanently disabled. 100,000 or more have been taken out of the workforce, and there's no end in sight. So quite apart from the economic considerations, Israel is now an international pariah. Its vulnerability has been exposed to all the world. States that have, a tiny fraction of the military budget that the United States have been shown, and military groups like Hezbollah have been shown to have the capacity even to attack the residence of the prime minister, the most heavily defended air base in Israel, Nevatim, which took dozens of strikes on October 1st from his Iranian hypersonic missiles. When I say Israel is doomed, I want to be clear what I'm saying. I'm not saying that it's going to be, all Israelis are going to be annihilated. What I mean is that this apartheid state, which has existed for decades, this state that is a colonial project that has subjugated the indigenous population for decades, more and more brutally year after year, will no longer be able to survive. Its days are numbered. Whether it'll happen, in 6 months, 3 years, I'm not sure, but I'm highly confident that if I live to be the average age of a North American male, I'll see it happen in my lifetime.
Wow. Dimitri, we can't thank you enough. It's great to see you again. Thanks for the great reporting. And we'll look forward to doing it again real soon, probably right after the BRICS meeting in the event that something happens. Take care, good luck, and keep it up, my brother.
You too, brother. Thank you.